I didn't know a single piece of paper could tell you exactly where you stood in someone's life until that Sunday morning. Mother's Day. I had lived long enough to believe I understood disappointment, to think I'd already learned the shape it takes. I was wrong. Some moments don't arrive loudly. They arrive dressed up as celebration, smiling at you from across a table. The house smelled like shrimp and butter, rich and warm, mixed with something citrusy floating up from the mimosas. Everything looked intentional, thought up. Everyone kept smiling the way people do when they're certain they've done something impressive and are waiting for the reaction to confirm it. I remember smoothing my dress before I sat down, the same way I used to do before school meetings or church programs years ago. Not out of vanity, out of habit. Muscle memory from a lifetime of wanting to show up correctly. I wasn't expecting anything extravagant. I never do. I've never been that kind of woman. But I did expect something. A word. Gesture. Something that felt like I mattered in the room I had helped build. Terrence had been buzzing all week. Calls that ended too quickly when I walked into the room. Conversations that shifted tones when my name came up. Malia whispering to him with a smile she couldn't quite hide. The kind that looks like it's holding a secret just long enough to enjoy it. Even the grandchildren were acting different. Hugging me tighter than usual. Clinging a second longer before letting go. Children always know before adults do. They feel changes in the air long before anyone explains them. I told myself not to read too much into it. I've lived long enough to know hope can embarrass you if you let it run too far ahead. Hope makes you fill in blanks no one promised to complete. Still, when I walked into their dining room and saw the table laid out so carefully, a small part of me softened. Cloth napkins instead of paper. Real glasses. Not the everyday ones. Plates arranged just right. Felt like effort, and effort still moves me even now. Yvette was already there, of course. Sitting tall in her chair like she belonged at the head of the table. A silk scarf draped just so around her neck. She was laughing loudly, telling a story no one had asked for. The way people do when they're used to being watched. She looked at me briefly. Gave a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes, then turned right back to talking about some influencer she follows who really understands luxury. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, then took my seat. I've always been good at that. Taking my seat. Knowing where to place myself. Terrence stood up not long after we began eating. He tapped his glass with a spoon, and the room hushed in that practiced way families do when they know an announcement is coming. His chest was puffed out. His eyes bright, like a man proud of a surprise he believed would land perfectly. I recognized that look. It was the same one he used to wear as a boy when he thought he'd done something clever. He started talking about mothers, about sacrifice, about gratitude. The words came out smooth, polished, like he'd practiced them in the mirror or rehearsed them in his head on the drive over. Each sentence felt carefully placed. My hands rested in my lap, fingers laced together, my posture straight. I told myself to just listen, to receive whatever this was with grace. Then he turned toward Yvette. He spoke about elegance, about dreams, about how some people are born for bigger things, for places that appreciate beauty and taste. I watched Yvette's face change as he spoke. Her smile widened with every sentence, her chin lifting slightly higher. Her hand already hovering near her chest as if bracing for applause she was certain would come. When he pulled out that gold-edged envelope, the room seemed to tilt just a little. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to feel it. Yvette gasped, actually gasped, pressing her fingers to her throat like she was in a movie scene she'd always imagined herself in. Terrence announced Paris. Business class flights. 5-star hotel. Shopping money. He hugged her and said, clear as day, "You deserve the world." The room erupted. Cheers. Laughter. Phones came out instantly, capturing angles and reactions, preserving the moment before it could even settle. Malia was crying, hugging her mother, repeating how proud she was. Yvette kept shaking her head in disbelief, already narrating her future to anyone who would listen. I sat very still. My smile stayed in place, but it felt like it had been pinned there. I waited. For the rest of the sentence. For the part where my son would turn toward me and say something that made sense of what I was seeing. Something that connected the words sacrifice and gratitude back to me. Took longer than I expected. Finally he turned. The energy in the room shifted, not sharply, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. No shine. No weight to it. The kind you buy in bulk without thinking. He handed it to me like an afterthought, like something remembered at the last second. For you, Mama, he said. We know you don't really care for fancy things. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a gift card. $15. Taped to the back was a small sticky note in Malia's handwriting, neat and cheerful. Told me to be grateful. It reminded me that some people have nothing. I felt the room before I felt myself. The noise dulled like cotton pressed into my ears. My heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It didn't break. Simply settled. As if it had been waiting for confirmation of something it already knew. I looked at the card again. $15. I thought about the food on the table. The glasses in their hands. The house we were sitting in. I thought about how casually value had just been assigned. I tucked the card into my purse slowly, stood up, and thanked them for brunch. My voice sounded steady. That surprised me. On the drive home I didn't cry. I didn't rehearse arguments or imagine confrontations I knew I wouldn't have. I kept thinking about how long it had been since anyone had asked me what I needed. Not what I could give. Not what I could fix. What I needed. And somewhere between their driveway and my own front door, it became clear. This wasn't about a gift. It was about placement. And once you see where someone places you, you can't unsee it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was starting to dip, that soft golden hour people like to photograph and pretend captures peace. I sat in the car for a moment longer than usual, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My mind kept circling back to one sentence Terence had said so easily, so confidently. You don't really care for fancy things. It wasn't cruel. That's what made it sting. It was said like a settled truth, like a conclusion he'd reached years ago and never felt the need to question again. I've never chased luxury. That much is true. I grew up learning the value of what lasts, not what shines. My mother taught me how to stretch meals and mend clothes, how to save a little from nothing and still sleep at night. My late husband used to say, anyone can buy something expensive. It takes patience to build something solid. We built a life that way. Quiet, careful, paid off, no drama. When he passed, he left me a home without a mortgage, a modest insurance payout, and something even rarer, peace. The kind that comes from knowing your bills don't chase you in your sleep. Terence was still young then. Not in age but in certainty. Hurt in ways he didn't know how to name yet. I watched him drift for a while after his father died, trying on different versions of himself, none of them quite fitting. I stepped in the way mothers do, without calculating the cost, without asking what it would require of me long term. When he met Malia and started talking about settling down, I felt relief before I felt caution. Hope does that to you. It smooths the sharp edges of memory and makes you forget how easily you can be cut again. When they found that house in the hills, the one with the wide windows and the view that made Malia gasp the first time she saw it, I knew immediately they couldn't afford it. Terence tried to explain the numbers to me like I hadn't been balancing a checkbook since before he learned to write his name. His credit was bruised from what he now called his wild years, spoken about lightly, like a phase everyone should simply move past. The bank didn't see it that way. They wanted reassurance, stability, someone solid to anchor the risk. So I stepped forward. $60,000 for the down payment. My savings. Money I had planned to leave untouched unless life forced my hand. I told myself this was life forcing my hand in a different way. I co-signed the mortgage. Put my name next to his. The paperwork was thick and heavy, the kind that makes your wrists ache by the time you finish signing. I read every page. I understood exactly what I was tying myself to. Malia hugged me afterward, arms tight around my shoulders. "We couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice soft, almost emotional. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Gratitude feels good when it's fresh. After that, the favors came quietly. Babysitting so they could reconnect. School fees that came up suddenly when money was tight. Summer camps, birthday parties, groceries slipped into my cart when I noticed their fridge looking bare. It never felt like sacrifice at the time. Felt like support. Like being useful in a way that mattered. I didn't keep score. I never have. Love doesn't survive scorekeeping. Yvette floated in and out of their lives like a visitor passing through a hotel lobby. Always dressed well. Always talking big. She'd arrive empty-handed and leave with praise, somehow credited for things she hadn't planned, hadn't paid for. She liked to talk about manifestation and abundance while living 2 months behind on her bills. I noticed the imbalance. I just didn't comment. Families are delicate ecosystems. You don't pull on one thread without shaking the rest. The thing is, when you're always the reliable one, people stop noticing the weight you carry. Fades into the background like electricity. Essential. Invisible. Only missed when it's gone. That night, sitting alone in my kitchen, I placed the $15 gift card on the counter and stared at it. I thought about the mornings I'd driven those children to school, the afternoons spent waiting outside classrooms, the weekends I'd given up so their parents could rest. I thought about how easily I'd told myself I didn't need recognition. How quickly that belief had been accepted by everyone else's permission. By Monday morning, the feeling had settled into something clearer. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. The kind that comes when you stop asking why and start asking what. I poured myself a cup of tea and opened the drawer where I kept important papers. Statements. Agreements I'd signed without ever expecting to need them. As I spread them across the table, I realized something that stopped me cold. Before anyone loses something, someone has to stop pretending everything is fine. And I was done pretending. I didn't wake up that Monday with a plan. I woke up with a question. And questions have a way of changing everything once you let them sit long enough. What exactly was my life supporting now? Not what I believed it was supporting. Not the story I'd been telling myself for years. The reality underneath all of it. I moved slowly that morning, the way you do when you don't want to rush past a truth that's finally ready to be seen. I spread the papers across my kitchen table, smoothing them out one by one like they might resist if I wasn't careful. The house documents came first. My name was there, clear as day, printed beside Terrence's. 50% ownership. I traced the letters with my finger, not out of sentiment, but recognition. I hadn't imagined my importance. It had been written down all along. There was a clause tucked into the agreement, written in careful legal language that boiled down to something simple. If payments slipped, or if I chose to step away, I had the right to force a sale and recover my investment. At the time, it had felt unnecessary. Formality. Something banks insisted on to protect themselves. Now it read like foresight. Like a door I hadn't known I might need, quietly waiting to be opened. Next came the credit card statements. The family card. I'd added Terrence as an authorized user years ago to help him rebuild his credit, back when he was still trying to find his footing. I rarely used it myself. He used it for gas, groceries, the occasional emergency. Or at least, that's what I'd told myself. I logged into the account and watched the screen load. The air in the room felt heavier as the numbers appeared. Pending transactions. Large ones. Airline tickets. Hotel deposits. Stores I'd only ever walked past, never stepped inside. The dates lined up neatly with the whispers, the travel brochures on their counter, the new luggage I'd noticed sitting by the hallway wall. My retirement money. Funding someone else's fantasy. It wasn't the amount that shocked me most. It was the confidence. The assumption that I would never look. Never question. Never pull back the curtain. That I would remain exactly where I had been placed. Quiet, grateful, and useful. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long moment, hands folded, breathing evenly. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. This wasn't a betrayal fueled by desperation. This was entitlement dressed up as celebration. Over the next few days, I did something unfamiliar. I stopped fixing things. When Terence called about a leaking sink, I told him I trusted his judgment. When Malia asked if I could keep the kids for the weekend because they needed a break, I said I had plans. I didn't explain. I didn't soften the refusal. Each no felt strange at first, like using a muscle that had gone stiff from neglect. But with every refusal, something in my chest loosened. They didn't notice right away. People rarely do. Absence takes time to register when presence has been guaranteed. They moved through their days assuming I'd step in eventually, the way I always had. By Friday I knew the timing was right. Yvette was due to fly out that evening. I imagined her at the airport, luggage lined up neatly, confidence spilling from her smile as she posed for photos she'd already planned to post. I imagined Terence and Malia somewhere expensive, congratulating themselves on pulling it all off, unaware that the ground beneath them was about to shift. I picked up the phone and called the credit card company. My voice was calm, professional. I reported the card as lost, asked for all accounts to be frozen, requested disputes on the pending travel charges. The representative didn't question me. Authority has a way of smoothing conversations when it finally speaks. Next, I opened my email and typed carefully. Brief. Formal. Notice of intent to liquidate assets. The words looked stark on the screen, but they were accurate. 30 days to respond. 30 days to buy me out or vacate the property. It wasn't personal. It was procedural. That distinction mattered to me. When I finished, I turned off my phone and stepped outside. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of cut grass from somewhere down the street. I stood there longer than necessary, feeling the quiet settle in around me. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't bracing for a request or anticipating a problem I needed to solve. I was simply standing in my own life again. The silence lasted a few hours. Then the phone rang. The phone rang until it stopped, then started again. I watched it light up on the table like it was trying to warn me of something I already knew. I didn't rush to answer. There's a difference between ignoring someone and giving yourself time to hear clearly. I needed the second kind. When I finally picked up, I recognized panic before Terence even said my name. "Mama, what's going on?" His voice was tight, breathless. I could hear noise behind him. Silverware clinking, voices laughing, the low hum of a restaurant still operating as if nothing had changed. My card just got declined. They cut it right there at the table. Everyone saw it. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, not out of exhaustion, but to steady myself. "I imagine that was uncomfortable," I said calmly. There was a pause, then Malia's voice cut in, sharp and strained. "This isn't funny, Hattie. We're supposed to be celebrating. My mother is already on her way to Paris. She just tried to check into the hotel and they told her the reservation was cancelled. Do you know how humiliating that is?" I thought about the way Yvette had gasped when she saw that envelope. About how easily she'd accepted the words, "You deserve the world," without wondering who was paying for it. "I can imagine," I said. "Humiliation has a way of clarifying things." Terence came back on the line, his tone shifting from confusion to fear. "You can't do this. The house. That email from your lawyer. Are you serious? We'll lose everything." "I'm being grateful," I replied, "for what I have, and for what I've been carrying without realizing it." Silence followed. The kind that tells you someone is searching for the right argument, the one they think will unlock you. When Malia spoke again, her voice was smaller. "She's stranded," she said. "She doesn't speak French. She has no money." I pictured wide streets, unfamiliar signs, a city that doesn't bend just because someone feels entitled. "Then she'll have to figure it out," I said. "The same way I figured things out when no one was watching." Terence's voice cracked. "You're my mother." "Yes," I said softly. "And that's exactly why this hurts." The conversation unraveled after that. Accusations followed by pleas. Promises made too late to mean anything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I stated facts. 30 days. Still. The end of my financial involvement. Every word felt clean. Final. When I hung up, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I'd always imagined moments like this would feel explosive. Instead, it felt like setting something heavy down after carrying it far too long. A week later, they tried to come by the house. I watched them on the security camera, standing at the gate, looking around like they expected someone to come rushing out and fix things. I didn't open it. I'd already changed the locks. Arranged security. Boundaries aren't loud. They're firm. I heard later, through family and neighbors who still talk, that Yvette had to sell her designer luggage to afford a coach ticket home. That Paris had been less forgiving than she imagined. That Terence and Malia moved into a small apartment, the kind Yvette used to wrinkle her nose at. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Knowing I was finished was enough. One last envelope went out in the mail. Plain. Inside was a $15 gift card. The same kind I'd been given. On the note, I wrote exactly what had been written to me. Be grateful for what you have. There are worse lessons to learn. People assume peace arrives with fireworks. Big moment. A dramatic ending. But peace doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly, the way dust does when no one has been stomping around anymore. I didn't feel victorious when everything went silent. Felt still. And after a lifetime of noise, stillness felt unfamiliar at first. The house sale went through faster than I expected. Investors don't ask many questions when paperwork is clean and numbers make sense. I sat at my dining table signing documents, the same table where I once wrapped birthday gifts for children who grew up assuming I'd always be there to catch whatever fell. As I signed my name, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about relief. When the money hit my account, I didn't celebrate. I made myself a simple dinner and washed the dishes slowly, letting the quiet stretch. That night, I slept without my phone on the bedside table for the first time in years. No emergency calls. No late-night worries. No sense that someone else's life was leaning on my chest while I tried to breathe. Weeks passed. Then months. Terence reached out once. A short message saying he missed me and hoped we could talk things through someday. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood that not every door needs to be reopened just because someone knocks gently. I didn't respond. Silence isn't punishment. Sometimes it's maintenance. I took my trip later than people expected. I didn't announce it. I didn't post pictures. I just packed a small suitcase and left. Sitting on a quiet balcony now, watching the morning unfold at its own pace, I realize how long it's been since I allowed myself to enjoy something without justifying it. No one here knows what I sacrificed. No one expects anything from me. That freedom is richer than any destination. I think back to Mother's Day sometimes. Not because it hurts anymore, but because it taught me something I wish I'd learned earlier. Disrespect doesn't always come shouting. Sometimes it arrives smiling, wrapped in politeness, carrying a small envelope you're expected to accept without question. And if you do accept it quietly, it assumes you'll accept the next one too. What stayed with me wasn't the $15. It was the note. Be grateful for what you have. I understand that sentence differently now. Gratitude doesn't mean tolerating neglect. It doesn't mean shrinking yourself so others can feel generous. Real gratitude starts when you recognize your own value and stop giving it away to people who only know how to spend it. I don't hate my son. Love doesn't evaporate just because respect does. But love also doesn't excuse being erased. I can wish him well without stepping back into a role that cost me my dignity. Both things can exist at the same time. If there's one thing I know now, it's this. The moment you stop paying for love, you find out who was renting you and who actually cared. And while that truth can sting, it also sets you free in ways comfort never could. If this story made you pause, sit with that feeling. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about boundaries, self-worth, and quiet strength, Take a moment to like this video and subscribe. We tell these stories so no one has to learn these lessons alone. And I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever been placed where you didn't belong? What would you have done in my position? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read them. We learn from them. And together we remember this. Love should never require you to disappear to be affordable.